Biorobotics at the University of Sussex, and he is the co-director of the Centre for Computational Neuroscience and Robotics, which is an interdisciplinary research group working at the interface of artificial intelligence and neuroscience, and also the be.AI, the Leverhulme Doctoral Centre for Biomimetic and Embodied Artificial Intelligence. So of great interest to us today is his view that intelligence is an active process. So it's a process in which adaptive behavior emerges from the interaction between the brain, the body, and the environment. So his research aims to both better understand intelligence, but also develop new biorobotics and artificial intelligence algorithms. And this is really best exemplified by his work on robotics, visual navigation and exploration, inspired by the quite incredible abilities of bees and ants to navigate and learn. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me and for looking after me so well. So I'm just going to, how do I start? Okay. And is that all right on the recording? Yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about, for the purpose of this, I'm going to talk about exploiting some embodied dynamics in robotic navigation. And Estelle has mainly talked about my first slide. So this is J.J. Gibson, the philosopher, J.J. Gibson. And one of the many clever things that he said was that perception is about how sensory systems put information at the service of behavior. So the point of this quote, I think, for us is that if you want to look at intelligence, it's often good to take a task-specific approach. And so we want to look at what the animal is trying to achieve and what it needs, what information it needs for that task. And in this, if you take this view, you can see intelligence is certainly an active process. We can see how the behavior emerges from the interaction of the body and the brain in an environment it's been involved in, but also how then the behaviors itself shape then that interaction. And so this kind of lovely dynamic loop. And the reason I study navigation is, in particular in ants and bees, is because they've got a suite of innate behaviors that they do the first time they come out of the nest and the first time they emerge. And so it's not something learned, but it serves to, it's a great system where you can see how it shapes the world. It's a really simple system. We study them not because they're wonderful animals, which they are wonderful animals, but because they're very simple to understand. And so to try and get deeper into this question, you can tease these things apart. So that's the kind of outlook we're taking. So a bit more about why we study them. So Hymenoptera, which is ants, bees, and wasps. I'm mainly talking about ants. So they're foraging specialists. So we look at them. This is an Australian desert ant, but the desert is kind of semi-desertic, if you like. So it's lots of grass tussocks and trees. The main thing is it's really, really hot. So pheromones just evaporate. And the second thing is that it means there's a big pressure for them to get back to their nest as quickly as possible. And so they've evolved for this particular task. The other thing is that the reason we study Hymenoptera is because they typically have one or a few reproductive queens. And then you've got specialist foragers whose only job is to go out, find food and come back, go out, find food and come back. They do it repeatedly. So for us as experimenters, if we give her a piece of cookie, she's got a cookie in her mouth there, she will, if we then move her or mess about, she will still try and return home rather than doing something weird. So she will redo her natural behavior. So it makes it very practical for us to study them. But even though they've got small brains, they have the same toolkit in Rudiger Wehn's phrase as we do. So they use odometry or path integration, so this sense of direction that we all have, allied to visual learning. Is that it? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
It's on the same second.
Oh, yeah. You need to do it from. Yeah. Is it? Oh.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay. When?
Yep.
Is that right? So if I go to this one. Yep. Okay, good. All right. So, yeah, so they've got the same toolkit as us, but simple brains. And yeah, key point for us today is that their brains, their bodies and behavior have been optimized for this one task. So they're not trying to find mates, they're not trying to do anything, they're trying to get home as quickly as possible so that they don't die. And this is the lovely brain. So a little bit about route navigation. So what is the process? So a naive ant will come out of the nest. She'll do some stuff which is known as a learning walk, which I won't go into particularly today. I've spent a lot of time studying it. But after that, she'll then walk out randomly along this path and find a dead insect. So these guys, their ecological niches, they come out when other insects have died in the heat. So they're trying to come out the hottest part of day possible but without dying themselves. So they find a dead insect. And this is the first bit of the toolkit. This is path integration. So here she'll integrate her steps, right, in a kind of vector integration type of way, and then she'll come back roughly directly to the nest. Okay. So we won't go into the path integration, but you need direction, compass, distance and compass, and they do have that. So they come back without prior knowledge of the terrain. So the problem is, I mean, if this was accurate enough, you would just do this all the time. But obviously it's prone to cumulative errors. In the Australian desert, they can be blown away they have these little wind storms and they just get blown away a few meters or a few centimeters. So they learn the visual information they need on the way back. And so this is in Seville, some work from Mike Mangan and Barbara Webb. So this is, if we look at the routes of foragers after they've established their thing. So this is 10 routes of an individual forager. And I think the blue is nest to the feeder and the orange is feeder to the nest. So this is one forager and she's going a consistent way, but a slightly different way out and back, kind of like we do. If I show you some routes of humans, it looks a bit like this. I certainly have a certain way onto campus and a certain way off it, and both of them are definitely the shortest way. And so that's kind of cool. This is the really interesting thing, I think. So this is her normal foraging route. And Mike picked her up after she'd foraged and put her over here in an area, because when we do these experiments, we normally put barriers up so we know they haven't been there before. So she's never been over here, and so she's only left with path integration. So she runs off her path integration vector and gets down to about here. And at this point, either she's close enough to the nest, she recognizes something, or starts a random search and comes into the nest. So that's fine. Now, what Mike did then, the interesting bit is he captured her here. So she now has, with the path integration vector, once she's run it off, she's got no information left. It puts her back at this point here. And she then basically recapitulates the same route. So she's only ever been here once. She's had one experience of it, and she does it pretty much directly. And they've got some new work showing this again, and it's remarkable the fidelity that they get. So they're learning this thing in a single trial. So you've got this one trial learning, and they do it all despite the fact they've got pretty poor vision. So without going into details, they've got very blurry vision. They've got a very wide field of view, basically all the way around them, but very blurry vision, right? So roughly down to this level, 3 degrees, right? So roughly a kilobyte pixel camera, right? Kilopixel camera. And they haven't got much brain. So this is their whole brain. It's all in a millimeter. This is the main thing, about 500,000 neurons, but the main learning structures are, you've got the central complex here and the mushroom bodies, and then these are the optic lobes here. So you've not got much stuff, but you're doing all this complexity. And, you know, for those interested in fMRI, so all this complexity fits in one voxel, right? So you've got all this remarkable stuff going on. So the question is how they do it. And what I will hopefully convince you of is the reason they do it is they're learning actions and not locations, right? And this enables them to train. They're doing something where they're doing familiarity and not recognition. So they're learning whether they've seen something before or not, what everything is. So they're not trying to categorize, just have they seen it before or not. And particularly for here, I think it works because evolution has had a lot of time to tune these innate behaviors so that the visual learning is made an easier problem. So this is the first bit. How do I use the information? So it's been known for a long time that they basically, to get back to a point of interest, they remember what the world looks like from that place, and then they move to make the world look more like a memory. So in this situation, we've trained an ant to find food in between these two cylinders. and then we take the food away and she searches in the right place. And if we replace one with a small one and one with a big one, she'll search where the world looks the same. Okay, and so this led to what's called the snapshot model, where you remember a view from the goal, and if you're away from the goal, you compare what you're seeing with your memory, and the difference tells you which way to go. Basically, it works because things move smoothly in space. And this works fine. If you give the infinite vision, you give it an iterative process, it gets back. It's one of the curious things. The nice thing about this process, because it's iterative, you can be really wrong and you're still going to get back at any one step, right? Be, up to 45 degrees wrong. And in this case, you've got a stored view. The view from here is attracted back to this position. So that's when I said I remember in locations. In this case, this view is telling me what this location is. So it was always thought, the problem is if you give it finite vision, you can home from a region around that where you can still see most of the stuff. And it was always thought that you just then do a chain of these snapshots. But actually, if you come to do this, it doesn't work so well because the nearby snapshots interfere. This one's telling me to go this way and this one's telling me to go this way. And you can make it work, and we made it work, but it's a bit of a pain. So instead, I won't go into this, so you get basic interference between the two. Instead, there's a different way you can use a snapshot. So views also change with rotation. So if I remember a view when I'm facing this direction, if I'm a little bit away from it, if I rotate on the spot, the place where it matches best when I'm facing the same direction. And so in this way, what I can do is, if I'm constrained to move in the way that I'm facing, like the ant, then what I'm recalling is the action that I'm taking at that point. So I search in space, in this rotational space, and I recall the action. And this kind of came about as around the same time as we realized that the basically snapshot thing wasn't working so well. Paul and Antoine, this is an ant slowed down a tenth of the speed. And you can see at various points it stops and scans and rotates in the world. So it's again outsourcing some of the computation to the behavior. So this is the first sort of innate behavior that enables this thing, that you've got this innate scanning. When you're uncertain, you scan more. There's been a few interesting models looking at quite how you do this, but you enable this visual search through your behavior. But I think embodiment in this case, which is probably, should say for this audience, embodiment here is a useful constraint, right? So you're constrained to move the way you're facing, but that means your facing direction gives you the action you should take in that instance. Now, this might seem a small change on how you use the memory, but in terms of then learning a set of these memories, it makes things a lot simpler. So what I now do is that if on my first path integration, on my first route back to the nest, I just learn the views as they appear. Right? Now, the first thing is that any nearby views, unlike when one was telling me to go one way and one the other, anything nearby is telling me to go the same direction. So I don't care which one of these I match with. Right? And indeed, I can match sensibly over a lot of them. The other crucial thing is that the path integration, this innate behavior, has structured the information so it's in the correct form that I have to learn it. I just walk my path, and the things that I'm seeing are already in the correct sort of frame of reference. So from a machine learning perspective, I've basically got my my training data done, right? It's already labeled and it's correct implicitly. And that's kind of how I see the sort of innate behaviors working. What we talk about is scaffolding, that it can put things in a way where it's much easier to learn it. So anyway, this is our model. The ant walks the path, learns the views as it appears. Now the problem with this, we're going to learn lots and lots of views. We can learn it continuously. So what we do is we train a neural network to learn the set of these views. And when we're coming back, we scan the world, see which is most familiar, and then move in that direction. The crucial thing for us is that because we're able to use quite a simple neural network, because I'm training the network not to recognize which one of each of these is, but whether I've seen it before or not. So it's fundamentally easier for me to recognize that I've seen some of you before and not remember either where, when, or who you were, right? So that's the thing. So what I get rid of, though, in this, I get rid of localization. I never know where I am. I just know whether I've seen something before or not. And so I trade localization for rapid learning. So this is the Does it? Yeah. Is that clock right? Is it 10 to? Yeah, almost. Okay. So this is my network. It's a single layer network. I won't bother going to it. We'd do an informatics rule. But yeah, I input the view to the network. I throw away the view, and then update the weights, and then just keep doing that. So it's really rapid learning, rapid training. And then when I'm coming back, I sample the world, and if the view looks familiar, it works. Right? I won't go into this. I'll just show you some stuff of it working. So this is my little robot. This is the training route. It's not as familiar, not as impressive as your robots. It's a bit Lego. It's got a panoramic camera on the top of it. I think the interesting here really is that people go past it and it really doesn't matter, right? And it'll recapitulate the route. And the reason that people don't matter, you can see if you look at the view from the robot. So if you see this person here is tiny, right? Even though they're quite big and salient to us, they're tiny in the panoramic view from the robot. And all the information is in the pattern of objects against the sky. And actually, we know that ants can use that to navigate. And the other thing to notice is that translations are not very salient. But as soon as you get a rotation like there, the cue is really obvious. And so, that's why we think they're able to do this stuff with such a, in a simple way. That learning this set of actions is really simple. Oh, and this is the robot going along in the woods that we're just testing this on. I'll chop this off because it's on the thing. I'm going to skip that, but there's some interesting stuff here. So I'm skipping a bit because I want to tell you that the stuff we're doing here, I think the innate behaviours scaffold visual learning, and it means the simplicity of the approach means we can encode it in a single layer neural network, we can learn routes in a single trial, and for me, which is important, we can plausibly model parts of the neural pathway. Right? We can roughly do a couple of 100,000 neurons in real time, maybe 100,000 neurons. We're getting up to be able to do 500,000 neurons in real time. So we can put it on a robot with a plausible spiking model of the brain and see what happens. I'm going to skip the acknowledgements, but everybody did all the work and I didn't. For anybody who's interested in this kind of work, this area of biorobotics, got an interesting project where we're taking this a bit further, working with, this is Andy Barron, who does bees and ants. This is Karen Nordstrom, who does hoverflies, and there's Bruno van Swinderen, who looks at selective attention in insects. So they're all in Australia. We're going to do the computational neuroscience and modelling in Sussex and a bit in Sheffield. But I've got a couple of postdocs on this if anybody's interested. I will send around the link. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, we're going to do some interesting work somewhere ranging from comp neuro to robotics and anywhere in between, really. We've also, I don't know if there's any master students on it, we've got a Leverhulme program, a doctoral program in be.AI, as mentioned earlier, looking at, again, kind of bio-inspired AI, right? Well, AI in its original definition, some would say, where we're trying to use models to understand intelligence rather than necessarily to make Google money. Don't record that. Too early. So in the last bit that I'm going to do, because I think it'd be interesting for you guys. Oh, how did that? If I end the show, I'll do this. Oh, I might need a bit of technical help here. Oh, it's working. How does that work? Okay. How do I? That's okay. Okay. Right. I just need to. So this is Phil Husbands, who some of you might know or remember from back in the day, talking about a completely different sort of embodied chaotic stuff.
Now, this next case study is all about the power of chaos, specifically how neuromechanical chaos pervading all levels of the brain-body environment system can be used to power a very resilient kind of adaptive behaviour, resilient to damage, changes in the environment and so on. And the interesting thing about this particular kind of chaos-driven system is that it's model-free. It doesn't need any kind of internal model that is given to it or it learns. So it just works entirely on its own complex dynamics. Now, this work, I should say, is with Jeff Shim, who did all the hardcore implementation. Now, many of you will know that for a long time there's been evidence of chaotic dynamics in biological nervous systems. Increasingly, it appears that many of these dynamics are functional. The full story there is still far from understood. So one of the motivations for this work is to try and shed some light. Part of our approach is an architecture which is a significant extension of prior work by Ryushi and Sangawa, who built a neuromodel spinobulbar units, motor control units, which are found in the spinal cord of vertebrates. So we can see the basic approach in this diagram. The approach is valid for arbitrary articulated bodies, sort of shown here. And each actuator, in fact, each degree of freedom of an actuator has attached to it one of these neuromotor units shown here, which is a CPG, which we'll see based around the neural oscillator, as a motor output connected to the actuator, and there's proprioceptive sensory feedback coming back from the actuator to the CPG. Now that passes through the boxes here labeled SA. In fact, this is about homeostatic processing. So this sensory input coming back, this proprioceptive sensory input, is homeostatically processed so that it goes within some particular reference bounds. That has an important effect. I'll talk about later to do with the way the chaos works. Now we see that the whole system is within a loop where there's a kind of performance feedback, and those control the bifurcation parameters, so they control the chaoticity of the CPGs. Because of the evaluation feedback, as the behaviour gets better, the chaoticity is reduced and the system stabilises. Before diving into further details and looking at latest results on analysing how the chaos works, let's see an example of the system operating. Bottom right panel there, you've got the red line, that's level of chaoticity in the system. White line is the performance level of the system. Above that are the phase differences of the CPGs, so that's indication of the dynamics of the system. See, it's suddenly settled down into a nicer dynamics, gone from chaotic, level of chaos has gone right down, performance has gone up, and it's performing well, because the performance in this case was to move as far away as possible from the starting position, in other words, in a straight line. So it's achieving that very well. So the applied chaos has gone right down, but whoop, let's fall off. So performance goes right down, level of chaos and automatically goes right up. We see dynamics really chaotic again in neural dynamics. System searching through the state space, in fact, warping the state space, is changing the state space, searching through, trying to find a stable attractor, so the performance will start going up. You can see the dynamics are still pretty chaotic, but there's some, indeed, the level of chaos is high. Occasionally, we'll see something like a stable attractor starting to appear, momentarily then disappearing. This is all system working in real time. It's slightly settling down the dynamics. And then suddenly, a more stable set of dynamics. Peer performance is going right up, level of chaos therefore goes right down. Now I've got a nice kind of peg leg hobbling walk here, which does the job nicely, moves the thing forward. See that the stays stable and off it moves. Now, another important property of these systems is that no prior knowledge of the attractors.
It's just showing that it works for different bodies.
Walking motion on the flat surface here. And in a different body, different environment, this one is sort of slippery surface, different body. Again, the system, exact same system within this, again finds another nice attractor. Okay, so can I stop Phil talking? Yeah. So in the interest of time, there's some more detail on that, but yeah, I just wanted to give you a flavour of that. And with that, I will thank Phil. I'll thank you guys for listening. Thank you very much.
Oh, I don't know who was first. Yeah.
Seems to be different insects.
Mm.
Can they do?
No.
Those?
I mean, there's some optimizations going on. There'll be a queue for distance, but they definitely don't do a map-like thing. And there's again, I cut it from the thing. There's a really nice experiment where you train ants to go out one way to go from the nest to food, but you make them go this way, out, and then back another way. And if you pick them up, they learn this really, really well, both ways. If you pick them up when they're going home and put them on the nest on the outbound route, they could carry on, they could go back, they could take the shortcut, and in fact they're lost because they're in a context of going home and they're in an unfamiliar environment. So they seem to be at this sweet spot, well, not sweet spot particularly, but they insulate the memories rather than integrating them into the map like thing. So I think that there is a fundamental difference. I don't think it's necessary that they can't. Maybe they don't need to, but it's possible that they can't, which is kind of interesting from looking at the neural machinery, what extra you need, right? Because it's not. No, wow, nothing found. It'd be really interesting to look for them, but I think they don't need. Certainly, the path integration circuit seems to be very well characterized. So Barbara's and they found that this ring neuron thing and that seems to be pretty good. But it's definitely more. I don't know whether it's just a simple thing of polar versus Cartesian coordinates. I don't know, but it seems like
So you've got the
yeah. No, there's definitely, this is the simplest. There is sequence effects, and they definitely be priming certain memories, but they're not. What fundamentally don't seem to be doing is associating them into a geocentric frame or even any other centric frame. They're not taking the path integration coordinates and saying, oh, this is here, and I reset my path integration at this point with these coordinates. I just don't seem to be doing that for whatever reason, because it would be sensible, right? But, yeah, but maybe they just don't need to. So yeah. 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 So the point, because you've got this panoramic memory, that the what is familiar to you, it's very different if I'm looking this way than if I'm looking this way. So the old snapshot models, where you would try to get back to a place, you would pre-rotate all your memories so they're all facing the same way, so I can do a sensible comparison. Whereas here, this view looks very different. So it's only when I face it the same way that it looks the same as my memory. So it's defined by the view, is defined by the viewpoint I take. So it's very much, it's pose dependent rather than pose independent. It's very different to like a mapping approach or something like that, where I need the information I've got to remain reference. I can't just get features and put them all in words or something. I need them to be, just to have that structure. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So the first if you put them somewhere with no visual cues, they'll go in the direction that their path integration tells them to do. If they've run out of path integration, they'll do a systematic search, and they've got lots of other little behaviors as well, which are all kind of boringly simple, but if there's somewhere where that's happened or whatever, one of the things that some of them do is backtracking. The first thing they do is unfamiliar, path integration is wrong, turn around and go back. Probably, it's a really simple thing. The video I showed of the ant messing this one, which is kind of fun. This thing here, this is a bit. This is slowed down. Here they were blowing an ant with a leaf blower because they often get blown away from the path. And at this point, it turns out that what they need to do to get back is they need to work out the direction of the wind in compass coordinates. So at that point where they clutch, they learn the direction and they associate it with the compass direction. Because if you put a polarized light filter over the top there, they lost. So then it means that they're going to come back roughly the right way to their route. So they've got lots of little innate behaviors to sort of make this thing more robust. It's kind of fun. Yeah.